I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans, America's premier home purchase lender. We've created a new way to protect you from unpredictable interest rates. Our exclusive Rate Shield approval. First, we lock your interest rate for up to 90 days. Then, if rates go up, your rate stays locked. But if rates go down, your rate drops. Either way, you win. Call us today at 800-QUICKEN or go to rocketmortgage.com.
Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year fixed-rate loans. Call for cost information and conditions. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS number 3030. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply.
Hello, world. This is T.J. Morris, and you're listening to ET Radio for American Communications Online tonight with Janet Carroll Lesson, our well-known co-host in Maui, Hawaii, with Aquarian Radio. We're syndicating tonight with American Communications Online, T.J. Morris ET Radio, and Aquarian Radio. And Janet Carroll Lesson, on Thursdays we have a women's talk, and she's found a very special lady named Agnes Andrews, and I'll let her say her name later so I don't mess it up. But Janet is very good at finding people that we like to align with in our ascension age. So let me get her on here, and we'll talk. So thank you, everybody, for listening around the world. We are universal, and we have our regular radio shows on YouTube, Spreaker, Stitcher, the big one, iTunes, FM radio, and many, many other places. So thank you, everyone, especially all our Facebook friends. We have thousands and listening to us, so thank you very much. If you can hear me and you want to call in, 347-945-7207, and we will take questions after the first hour. Okay, Janet Carroll Lesson, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Hi.
Great.
I'm going to tell listeners a little bit about Agnes, and I want Agnes to correct me. Toews-Andrews is the hyphenated last name. I have a bio and a bunch of information about Agnes and pictures on aquarianradio.com, and I think TJ will be putting it on her websites as well. And tonight we're going to talk to Agnes about her ETs that she is in contact with. She's an ET contactee since a child. She's seen UFOs and IFOs, Identifiable Flying Objects. She's a dweller on several portals, and she's going to talk about the UFO Trench of BC, British Columbia. She's a Reiki Master since 1992. I guess it was in Jerusalem. She received her certification. She's a Metaphyscian Master, and she received her initiation on Mt Shasta. And she's had many visions and beyond-the-body experiences. She was taken to Source and the Goddess on several occasions. She's a connector to the Angelic and Devic Realms, many of which she has seen and received messages from. She's a Fire Priestess, which means she has access to the spiritual hierarchy, including the 13 spirit grandmothers of time, who are 12th dimensional ancient beings from many different stars and planets. She's an Earth representative of one grandmother since 2004 and carries one of the grandmother's shields, the lizard shield, and this shield represents preconsciousness, the goddess, genetic memories, reptilian human crossbreeding, and crystal intelligence. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of things, angelics and divas, the ascension body, what this means, and how to create an ETs that have visited. And she's got some YouTube videos. All of this is on aquarianradio.com, and then TJ will be telling what websites that she's putting it up on. Back to you, TJ. What would you like to say before we bring on Agnes?
I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit, and just because this is going up for everybody, so they'll know a little bit about you. And I'm calling from Gulf Breeze, Florida, and you're calling from Maui, Hawaii, but give them a little bit of background on you real quick since we're recording here live, please.
Okay.
And we'll go on to Agnes.
Yes, I'm I'm TJ's partner in crime, her co-host since 2012 on many, 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 many shows. We are documenting the 21st century human life here on the planet. And I work with my husband, Dr. Sasha Lesson, here in Maui, Hawaii. We have a counseling practice, although somewhat limited, so because we're kind of semi-retired, but we do see clients still. And I'm a radio host with him on Revolution Radio, as well as with Theresa J. Morris on Thursdays. And I'm an author. We've got about 10 books done and another, 5 or 6 books in the process. TJ and I are going to work on a book, but we got to get to it. It's already February. That's our 2019 book. We've got to get it done. And I have a bunch of cats. I have a cat colony, and they keep coming, and we keep feeding them. So everyone's making a donation. Soul Foundation. I don't have that site up yet. Anyway, just contact me at Aquarian Radio Gmail, because we can feed them, but we can't see them. We don't have enough money for the vet, and they're hard to get there because they're half wild. The kitties, we have a cat colony. It's registered with Hawaii, but we can use donations to help bring a vet up here. We'd like to have a vet come up and look them all over once in a while, give them their shots and stuff. But anyway, so far we've had 22 years here in the island of Maui, Hawaii. And that's about all I want to say about myself. Back to you, TJ.
All right. Well, that was pretty thorough. Okay. That was pretty thorough. Today. All right. Well, that was just something you needed to talk about. All right. Let's get to Agnes. Go ahead, Agnes.
Greetings, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here today and to talk about my experiences as a planetary citizen and talk about what I feel a duty to share. So fire away. Do you have some questions for me? You talked earlier about that you'd like to talk about some ETs that I'm in contact with and IFOs, identifiable flying objects that I have encountered, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'd love to ask questions. You want to go back and forth, TJ? We can take turns. I ask one, then you ask one. Does that work for you, TJ?
Can you hear me?
Okay, so I'll start.
I'd like to hear her talk, and then we could ask questions after if it's okay. But I'd like to hear from her for the first time, and then however you ladies, I'm going to mute so you two do the dance, and I'm going to listen for a few minutes.
Okay. So Agnes, we like to start with the guest, and you're the guest. Tell us your story. Tell us about yourself, and go back to your earliest memories, especially when it involves spirituality, consciousness, becoming aware that you were more than a 3D personality, that you had some kind of contact with higher beings or extraterrestrials or whatever it was for you, and kind of give us an overview for about 15 minutes, and then we'll ask you some questions.
All right. Okay. Well, I was watching a sunset in rural British Columbia when I was about 13, 14 years old. And while I was watching that sunset, I was overcome by an experience. It felt like a light had dawned in my psyche. And I saw my soul purpose at age 14. And I knew that I was to be an activator of humanity and a spiritual teacher of humanity. So I put that kind of in the background of my life, if you wish, and knew that at some point in my life I would get back to that. I originally thought that it meant that I should be a missionary, but I observed my aunt, who was a missionary in the Belgian Congo in those days in the 60s, and I didn't like what they were doing, is trying to convince people about a certain religion. And when I was 16 years old, I left the religion that I was brought up in, which was Mennonite Brethren, and I began to seek other ways of expressing what I was seeing and what I was beginning to know. So the journey went on for about 10, 15, 20 years, where I had children and so forth, and went through 2 marriages and suddenly I'm experiencing someone asking me, what do you think about reincarnation? And that really got me going on my spiritual journey again. I was about 37 years old at the time. So I researched reincarnation, and before I knew it, I had accessed a spiritual healing modality, which is known as Reiki. It was rediscovered in the late 1800s, and it's a hands-on healing technique. And I thought immediately when I heard about it that I needed to pursue this healing art, which I did. And it was kind of interesting because I was at that point living with my husband in a blue-collar town, military town. He was a military base commander, fighter pilot type. But I found a Reiki Master teacher, and while she was teaching me the classes, I had an out-of-body, and during that session of out-of-body, I went back to the Pleiades star system, and I was walking around in this beautiful place with these Corinthian-type columns all around me, and this beautiful, felt like a big pool with this golden light emanating from it, and there were all kinds of amazing beings walking around, and I knew that I'd been there before. I recognized later that this was the star of Alcyone. It was where the golden light has come from, and it's actually the center of our universe in our galaxy, which we access from planet Earth. And so I discovered that I was Pleiadian in my origins. And from then on, the visions became stronger and stronger, and I began to work with Reiki very seriously.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because I want to flesh that out a little bit. So you were just in a Reiki session, and you ended up doing this out of body and going back and discovering all this stuff. What was going on with this Reiki that was so powerful that it? Because I haven't heard anybody getting that type of insights, but maybe that's more common than I know. But is that common in Reiki that you get? It's almost like you were hypnotized, regressed. What was going on there? Yeah.
I've been visionary since a child, and I came into this life as a wise elder, which has been read in my fingerprints many years ago. So Reiki, it was a catalyst. It was during the classes when the Reiki Master was doing the initiations, and it was during those initiations that were very powerful for me that I went back into my cellular memory and went out of my body to experience as well. So it was very powerful for me, but it was like a little kick in the what's a good term for that? A little kick underneath me for me to remember who I was.
Wow.
Okay. It started off on a pretty interesting journey, and not long after that, I was doing Reiki constantly. I had clients that just came just kind of out of the blue, and I was very, very busy facilitating Reiki hands-on healing. And also during that time, I had many appearances of Jesus standing beside my Reiki table. And at one point, about half a year after I started doing energy work, I had a very powerful experience where I knew somebody was trying to contact me. So I laid down on my meditation room in my meditation room, and suddenly there was a hand on top of my head, and I saw Jesus, who's also known as Sananda, and he's an amazing avatar, as I'm sure you all know. And he facilitated like an ascension process with me at that time. And I was kind of in my early 40s at that time, and my whole body, I saw my body splitting apart, and there was this golden pillar of light that went right through the center of my body, and it was kind of like I was a split pea, there was a left side and a right side. And Jesus said, you're my beloved daughter in whom I'm well pleased, which sounds very biblical. But what I took that to mean was that I was following in his footsteps, that I was being a teacher and being anointed into being a teacher of spirituality and so forth. So that was
now, what did he look like? Can you describe what the manifestation of Jesus, what he looked like as he appeared to you?
Absolutely. There was a picture hanging in my bedroom as a child of Jesus, And he pretty much looked like that. He was wearing a long white robe, and he had brown hair to the shoulders, and it looked like he had this crown of gold all around the top of his head, his crown chakra. And I think it's very interesting because I lived in Israel for 2 years, and I taught Reiki there. And one of my students would keep seeing Jesus, but with a tefillin on his forehead. That's the little Jewish gadget that individuals wear, which is supposed to give them a more of a metaphysical connection to their meditations and readings.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think he feel pretty sure that he appears to people as how they would recognize them or how they need to see them.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I had a past life recollection with Jesus, and he had like sandy-colored hair. It wasn't blonde, it wasn't brown. It was like a mixture. It had streaks of different, like yellow streak and a red streak and different streaks throughout his hair.
Rainbow-colored hair.
Incredible. Yeah, well, it was like somebody had gone to expensive, beauty parlor, and he'd pull the little pieces through, and the little pieces get colored different colors. It's all within the hair range of color, but it was very beautiful. And but the eyes were like piercing, and they would draw you in and see right through you.
Right.
Yeah, so that was my recollection. TJ, have you ever had any visions of Jesus or Sananda?
Oh, sure, most of my life, but they change with age, and the last time was here on a spacecraft traveling through. Remember, I told you, to me it was like Jesus, and then I've seen Tom turn to Jesus with gold light come down on him when my husband was alive. So I always felt guided by the Jesus or Sananda or Yeshua, as my children call him, Yeshua. So there's many names, and some people believe how their intuitive self sees that which represents that particular concept. And cultures change because, in Africa they have a black Jesus, and Jews if they believe in Jesus, have a Jewish Jesus. And then the Mormon church I was in for years, from May 1272, I think the head of the church said he was blonde hair and blue eyes. I think it depends on who sees what, and it's we need to talk about that later on because it's our concepts and filters and culture and what we know as words, and I'm all about that because when we break it down, it's all particles and waves. So, it depends on our level. But yeah, when I was a kid, I probably saw the same picture, one close to what Agnes saw, because I thought he wore a white robe and had long hair, and there's a picture in my living room of him like that sitting on a beach. So I know what you're talking about. So as long as we know what we're talking about, we know. So when you talk to people about God or Jesus or Sananda or Yeshua or Gabriel, whoever, angels, we sort of have an idea. So that's what you have to do is get to the bottom line is, are we talking, what level of education? And a lot of people may not even know what we're talking about if you think about it, but we're speaking English. So, but yeah, Janet, I've had plenty of those sightings. But the last time I saw him, he had hair like Obama. Remember, I told you it was gray and black and short to the hair. Didn't speak, just intuitively spoke to me. But he was on a spacecraft with some tall people and short people. Remember when they picked me up in Gulf Breeze? Yeah. So that was my Jesus. I didn't know how. To me, he was Jesus. So to each his own. But back to you, ladies.
Right.
Keep going. Go ahead. I'm going to move back. But thanks for asking me. Go ahead.
Okay. Back to you, Agnes. So you were having, I forgot why we got on that, but go back to what you were saying about Jesus. I'm sorry. I stole the ball. But
you want to go back to ETs?
Well, back to where you were, because I just lost where you were in your story, so I hope you were tracking yourself. I should be tracking you better. Sorry, but go ahead.
That's all right. I think we're done with Jesus. He's an amazing avatar, and, he came here to teach us how to live, and that was really important mission that he had. And, So I could talk about Moses, or I could talk about Merton and Jason, who were two ETs that visited me about the end of 1997. They were pretty.
Well, let's go back
cool
to your child. Was there anything in your childhood? Usually, what we find, and I don't want to lead the witness, but we find that there are things that start in your childhood that lead to this where you are now. A lot of critical incidences happened early on. Let's dwell a little bit more in your early years. So what else happened in your early years?
Well, going back to the age of about 5, 6, I was taken aboard a ship, a very small circular spaceship, and they were the Zeta Reticuli that are also known as the Grays, and they took me upon the ship, and they laid me down on a massage-type table, and I was fed some green junk, and I fell asleep, and I don't know exactly what happened. I was very young at the time, but my sisters and I used to sleep out under the stars in the summer, so this is when I was invited upon the ship, and I've always been a very curious person. I've been an explorer and wanted to explore forever, and I would always tell my mother things, and then I'd say, oh, that's not right. I'm going to go and explore this over in the forest or something like that. And anyway, I don't remember a lot about that other than I feel they have placed a device on me, and it's in my nostrils, and they've been able to follow me upon occasion. And most recently, they were in a spaceship above my place here in the Selkirk Mountains in British Columbia, West Kootenays. And I asked them what they were doing, and they said they were observing me. And the next day I had a Reiki class that I was facilitating, and lo and behold, they were there, and my students saw them as well. And they were observing us doing Reiki. And shortly after that, they also came into a Reiki session that I was doing, and I saw them having hands onto the person that we were facilitating for. So these are the Grays that many people know about. And when I first encountered them after that age 6 time frame was when I'd moved to the UFO Trench of British Columbia. By the way, we have a center to the universe in British Columbia, and it's been confirmed by the Tibetan monks who were sent up by a Rinpoche in San Francisco. And it's about 6 hours, a little bit west and north of where I'm living now. I've been there several times. So we do have a lot of activity here in this province, and there's a large ley line that runs up, which is the North Thompson River Valley, and it pools in Jasper, Alberta, where there's a portal. So when I first moved to that area, I opened up my place as a retreat center, and was shortly after I'd moved there when I was in a meditation, and there were several Grays standing around my meditation bed, and I just kind of saw them and was observing them, and then they said to me, "We too are God's children." And I thought that was really interesting because I know there's several books written about them as being, the bad guys, they're abducting individuals and so on. And perhaps this is some part of their group, but these particular individuals seem to be very much open and willing to observe a human being who was already, well advanced in my clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient abilities. And I felt that they were also around me at times when I was highly emotional, and I zoned in on the concept of them wanting to feel more. I believe that they have lost their emotional body, and this is what they're attempting to regain.
Right, I've heard that as well, that they lost it. Now, some people think they're future selves. I think that that's both. I think there's, the future comes back to the past, but there's still extraterrestrials. And What do you think about that, TJ? You've interacted with a lot of Greys. Do they seem to have limited ability for emotions, or?
Well,
what are your thoughts?
I've had different, in government, out of government kind of situations in 3D form, but when I was in Flagstaff area, they visited me. Sounds funny, but when I'd go and be by myself in the bathroom after driving a big truck or something, they'd come in and just stare at me. I felt very odd, different faces. So, I've seen them with the bigger eyes and the smaller bodies, and I felt like they were very curious. But remember when I worked with Tom, and Tom and I were working off planet, the way that Tom described it to me personally, we talked about, he didn't want to talk about God or Jesus, but he talked about the Greys, and, he said they didn't really have, it's like Agnes said, they don't really have emotions, but remember my training is the fact that we worked with white Nordics, or people that look like us from the high area. They were lighter skin in space, and Tom explained it that they were smaller, and when he went to their planet, the planet had been blown away. So they didn't have their original place in space, so we had taken them on to work with us. So there's that level in my mind. Then coming down here and learning about different people that have been abducted, there's that level. But when Tom and I were doing research for President Reagan, the fact was that we found out they would put them back. So what it was, the way that I understood it was from the observer here in this human form in this container, is the fact that some do, because we're all experiments at one level or another down here, of the 22, the DNA, and that they are still researching for their group. But I can't say, because I've heard so many different stories. I personally haven't gotten the concrete evidence that I would say is a finding of fact. So I listen to everybody's stories, but being around them, they were very curious. And when I had to do some training with them was to interpret, but they didn't talk to me. They used their ESP. So to me, right, if I had to say, I would say that they're much more advanced than we are, and that they lost their place in space, and so they signed on with the people that found them and work with all the others together, being that they're far more advanced. So that's why I think some people believe they're us in the future, those that follow time travel. So there's so many stories, but the main one in the 3D are nuts and bolts people, like MUFON people will say they're from Zeta Reticuli, Betty and Barney Hill type Greys. So, when we're talking about them, we need to talk about the Greys, the middle, the ones that look like the Japanese, the small, tiny ones, 3 to 5 feet, the ones that fly the ships. So you can't just say, hi, I'm a human, or hi, I'm a Grey. So that's what I've learned, but I'll mute now. So back to you, Janet.
Okay.
We're all ETs,
Okay, back to you, Agnes. Continue with what comes to your mind about your experiences.
I just wanted to add one thing about the ETs, the Greys or Zeta Reticuli. When I was promoting a book in the area, I was talking about my experiences in the Middle East, and I've been in contact with Moses and Mother Mary have appeared, and so on and so forth. And anyway, when I was presenting this lecture, I kept feeling there was a woman in the audience who is also an ET contactee and from the Greys. So after the session, when we were all kind of just chatting, I asked her if she was in contact with ETs, and she kind of looked at me funny, and then I said, I think you are. Can you talk about it? And then she said that she was in contact with the Greys, the ET Zeta Reticuli, and that they had been doing crossings with human genes and ET genes. And she had been teaching the young ones, the young hybrids, she'd been teaching them nursery rhymes and singing with them in her garden that summer. So guess what? there are hybrids.
Right.
So, yeah,
yeah,
I thought that was a really interesting aspect to that. So I had to add that story. But one of the most amazing experiences was a huge spaceship that was over my retreat in the mountains, the Central Mountains. This is a place where I was just after I came back from 2 years in Israel. And it was 1997, and I woke up at 1:30 at night, and there was this huge circular, silverish-looking thing out there that I could see through my bay window. I thought at first it was the moon, but then realized it was much larger than the moon. I watched it for about 10-15 minutes when I woke up my husband, who was a retired fighter pilot, and he woke up as I woke him up and sat up in bed and started explaining how that ship was powered, which was really, really interesting. And I knew at that moment that the captain and co-captain had been communicating with him in his dream state. And so that was really fascinating to hear him talk about that.
So and he was channeling, you're saying? You're saying that he was channeling? Was he channeling, or was he in contact with them as he was speaking, or
he was in contact with them in his dream state. He was asleep.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, beside me. Yeah. But I woke him up, and when he sat up in bed, he immediately started explaining how the spaceship was powered without even me telling him there's a spaceship out there.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So that was really fascinating. And the next day, it was back at our place again. It was around traveling across Canada for 10 days in late 1997. And I asked to be connected to the beings on board. And lo and behold, there were two individuals that appeared in my living room. And they told me that they were Merton and Jason. And Merton said he was from Sirius, and Jason said he was from Orion. And I asked them who they were, and they said that they were a part of a council made up of beings from the confederations of the star systems of light. And they also said there's a group of scientists on board from the Galactic Council. And I asked them what they were doing over Canada. And they told me that they were doing an environmental cleansing over Canada. And I asked, why Canada, of course? And they said, and this was in the late 90s, that Canadians were deemed the most open-minded people on planet Earth, and that we were receiving this cleansing so that more light could flow into this part of the planet.
Wow, that's cool. So do you find that to be true? Are Canadians more open-minded?
I think so. I've traveled extensively across Canada with doing book tours and spoken on television and radio and so on. And, you know, I've been invited to speak on our national radio station, CBC Radio, about ETs and so on. And one of our former defense ministers, Paul Hellyer, was the defense minister. Hellyer, yes. And he had an exopolitics group, and he talked openly about ETs and the contact. And of course, my husband confessed at the time, you know, being a fighter pilot, they had chased ETs all the time. You know, they were always coming into the airspace over eastern Canada and the United States and so on, and Bermuda especially as well, where he was often working in liaison with the American fighter pilot group. And he also worked at the Pentagon, so he knew stuff. You know, he knew about ETs being about and spaceships flying into our airspace. So
is he able to talk to you about that? Is he able to have conversations, or does he have to be quiet?
On one of our first dates, he hinted about extraterrestrial life in the universe, and we're out canoeing. And he said to me, this was in the early 80s, before I'd really opened up to my visionary and other capabilities, and he said, do you think there's ET life out there? And I think I denied it, you know, at the time. But I knew at that time. time he knew something, it was always like he planted a seed. And then when we observed this spaceship we didn't see it every day in those 10 days because sometimes we had cloud cover. But at the end of that session, we had a huge storm in the mountains. It was just like blowing for 24 hours. And after that, it was just, I can sense and see energy, and I could just see how much clearer our whole atmosphere was. And it seemed to extend for a great distance. So it was remarkable how there was an energy shift. So that was pretty exciting to experience that and to have them. And guess what?
What?
Jason, the astronaut from Orion, said that I knew him from before in Greece. And I put two and two together, and I said, "You're Jason of the Argonauts."
Oh.
Do you remember that Grecian story that we all think is probably a myth? So
you're saying he was an extraterrestrial, but he had a human life, and then he's out there from Orion. Well, that's what I get too. That we're not limited to incarnating here.
Yes. Yeah. He was Jason of the Argonauts, and they were also astronauts at the time, right? And scientists.
Oh,
many
astronauts.
thousands.
That's close. The word Argonaut astronaut, very close.
Argonaut astronaut. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really, really lovely that he'd come back and said hello.
So he knew you in a past life.
Yes, in Greece.
Do you think you were lovers? Did he really
know
you?
No.
Okay.
I feel that I was a shepherd boy at that time in Greece. That was my feeling of it. And I was outdoors, all the time and out under the stars, and that was a great kind of an occupation to be connected to extraterrestrials. They've been around forever. We've been here for 300 million years in this latest phase, and since the Permian era when the continents split apart, and so we've experienced a lot.
Oh wow, TJ, don't want to leave you out of the conversation. What are your thoughts, ideas, feedback, questions?
On which part?
Anything, whatever comes to mind. Be spontaneous.
I don't know. I think everybody that's ever heard anything about Greek mythology loves Jason and the Argonauts. But, when we meet people, it's romantic, and we have a thing always in the Akashic field, especially with visionaries and mystics, oracles, psychics, sages, seers, shaman. And, I've had friends and trained people in the tarot and stuff. So we get gigged all the time about coming up with people with, in mythology and folk life and all that, because it's so romantic and so programmed in our inheritance with words. So we get kidded that way. But, anything's possible. Anything is possible, whatever it reminds us. But, I had a life back where I thought I've had documentation with people about Sarah and catharinosis and all of that stuff back in the day. And I think we all are romantic when it comes to our mythologies. And, that was one of the beautiful ones. So who knows when we meet people if that's a name that sticks. And mine's Theresa, the Ray Sa, so T-H-E-Z, Ray, R-E, and Sa. So when I was broke down in Chicago, an Egyptian, what do they call those people that speak Egyptian? The language.
The Egyptian-speaking people.
They broke down Egyptology and told me that Theresa. But back then I was Thera, and of the Isle of Thera in Greece. So I believe that, even back then I was doing the kind of work I do now as a visionary. But I've just sort of accepted now. But I like the idea that she meets people and has memories. I think it's part of us. So I don't know where we're going But you keep going back to ET stuff. But, also I like the fact that her husband was a pilot, and we're doing a lot with pilots, and then tomorrow night on Friday with the men. So maybe, is your husband still alive, Agnes? Can he come on the show Friday?
I don't think that he would speak about it.
Talk?
I can ask him.
No,
but
okay.
He's been
Ken
retired now.
Night. Yeah. Ken worked at NASA, and we have he's a pilot, and my husband was, and I did a little, small things and helicopters and stuff, but nothing, no big deal, in and out of country, mostly Europe. But it's fun to talk about, so just let him know. Tonight's sort of a girl night, but just that you're mentioning some men, and it's romantic, if we think we've got some kind of past life with people. But you said you were a young boy then, so I don't know where we want to go with this.
I've had other lives in Greece. I've had other lives in Greece as well. I have. I was told in a meditation at Mt Shasta that in the higher dimensions I'm known as Ishtar. And Ishtar is also known as Inanna, Aphrodite, and Ashtarte. And so obviously I was, putzing around Greece in that lifetime, it's about 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 years ago. And I've had flashes of it, and I write about it in my new book, The Goddess Lives. And I felt it was a real interesting thing for me to discover, because I know at that time that we did a lot of experimentation with various aspects of spirituality. There was a lot of sexual exploration. There was a lot of DNA exchanging going on, and so on and so forth. And I've discovered through having a connection with Zeus, who's also known as Anu, who's a Nigerian god or director on that planet, and he was my great-grandfather or something, in the past of that nature, either grandfather or great-grandfather.
Anu was your father's father. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's Anu, and then it was Enlil, and then
and
I have to look at my books, but I know that Anu came down and made love with his granddaughter Inanna in a sacred tantric ritual. There's it's all written up in ancient Sumerian, and there's a big translation. You can look it up. But it's interesting because if you go back, they were the Anunnaki, and I identify with Nimma as I don't know if it's an incarnation or just an aspect or a fractal. We're trying to figure this out because a lot of us have like the fractals of the gods and goddesses that run through our I don't know if it's the DNA memory or soul memory.
Nimma was my mother.
I'm Nimma, so I'm your mother. No, Nimma was your auntie. Yeah, that was her brother who was your father. But Nimma had sex. Nimma had children by both Enki and Enlil because they weren't monogamous. They were, and of course, you were having sex with your grandfather. So their sexuality was different than human sexuality because they wanted to keep the gene pool clear and, pure. Yeah. What were you going to say,
But
TJ?
I was a hybrid. I'm a hybrid Nigerian or Anunnaki or reptilian hybrid, if you wish, because that's another aspect of the Anunnaki, right? And so there was this experimentation going on with humans that were from other stars like Sirius and the Pleiades, and apparently we were often chosen to be in sexual relationships to produce a hybrid. And part of this, I felt, was to create a higher intelligent human. That was my feeling of it when I saw a lot of this life.
Let me add to
that.
Yeah,
we've all gone through these different.
Right. Let me add to that, and then I'll pass the stick back to you. So we have an invisible talking stick, by the way. So the hybrid program, before we thought it was all like the Sumerian story from the Sitchin, that it was just this one way. But the hybrid experiment on the Earth involves combining, different DNA of all kinds of species, right? Just like our scientists are doing now with our DNA experiments. And so it's very possible. They wanted to create what's called the metagene, which is it's like a higher functioning DNA structure that can be very spiritual, conscious, evolved, that have lots of abilities that are outside of normal 5D reality. And they call it the metagene, which was the result of all these genetic experimentations with different species. So that's why humans are so valuable. It ended up in the human form. So you could be a spiritual hybrid, and you could be a genetic hybrid, and you can be both. So it's not one-dimensional. So I had a friend, Cynthia Crawford, and she had her DNA analyzed by the government because she was one of the government hybrid programs, and she was telling me, I have a certain percentage that's gray, a certain percentage that's reptilian, a certain percentage that's human, a certain percentage that's whatever, so she was part of the human hybrid program of the 20th century. She was born in the mid to late 40s, right? So we have many generations of hybrid experiments going back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, but we're only finding out about it now. So yours was part Anunnaki, but you're saying, what were you saying the other species was? I forgot what you just said.
Pleiadian. A Pleiadian and Reptilian or Anunnaki. And I've also have a very strong connection to Venus, and I feel like there's some Venetian DNA as well within I've not had my DNA read, but I've been taken out of body to Venus on a few occasions and had this amazing explosion of light and a feeling of home when I've been there as well. So we're all ETs.
Well, if you do Ancestry.com or 23andMe, they're not going to tell you about your extraterrestrial DNA. But TJ, your daughter, because of her medical procedure she's going through with her cancer, didn't they talk to you about her DNA that wasn't 100% human? Talk about you?
Yeah, we're O positive. We're O positive, but the oldest in the world. But yeah, we have extra genes or metagenes, if you want to say that. And they study the T cells, T13, T17. But yeah, we have a lot of Nordics that study the human genome and, all of that. So it's very much right now with the biologicals. And that's why we had our pastor on here, because he's one of the biology. I had a gentleman on LinkedIn.
What did they say about your daughter's DNA?
Yeah, it's not white, black, brown, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. It's other. Most of the people are from Germany, or like they say, Africa and Germany. Most people, when they do their blood types and all of that, we all stem from, the European theater, so to speak. But at this point, when you get down to people in today's time, and they do the studies and break everything down, they get it very, very minute, and they look at everything. And so she's very uniquely different. So
so your daughter's a hybrid. Your daughter's a hybrid, right?
Everyone's hybrids. Everyone on the planet is a hybrid. But
I feel
we all know this. We all know this and talk about it openly in certain behind closed doors. Your blood line is the most sacred, sound, physical and biological.
Powerful elixir.
They keep it very secret in the hospitals. It's very, very.
Yeah, they're not going to tell you that you have alien DNA if you get 23andMe or Ancestry. They're not going to tell you.
Well, they break it down. They know. We already have synthetic DNA and all of that, but that's a whole other level of existence if we go that, scientifically. But it's okay. Let's keep moving on the DNA. We can talk about Gilgamesh and Ishtar. I've been called Ishtar and Inanna and Zeus, and I told Tom my grandfather and my father was Zeus, and my name's Thurmond and Thor's protection. So there's all kind of signs all the way down in our family and genealogy that we're all related. If we go all the way back up, we're all one and the same anyway at some point. we talk about God
right.
and how all fractals are all pieces or sparks. So it's just how we relate to the sound of the words when we're talking to each other, So it's going to be what it's going to be. And every time you talk to a different human, you get another aspect, and maybe it rings true for yourself. So, it's fun to talk about how all this works together and how Agnes is spiritual before she met her husband, and then how she's changed over the years. Agnes, I'm 67. Are you close to my age by chance?
I'll be 79. I'll be 71
Which life?
on the 13th of February.
You sure now? Which aspect of you are we speaking to?
Now.
What's your birthday again, Agnes? What's your birthday?
13th of February.
Oh, well, I just turned 65 on the 6th. Yeah, yesterday.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
We're the same. Thank you, and happy birthday. So we're baby boomers. Yay.
Yes. And I was born to this wonderful Mennonite brethren mother, and I was born on a Friday the 13th, and the nurses in the hospital warned her about this child. And they said, watch out for her. She's going to be very different. She might be a challenge. So, that was so amazing that these nurses said this to my mother, because whenever I told her stuff, had a vision or saw somebody who I was in a past life, and I'd tell her about it, she'd just kind of look at me and say, uh-huh. And, she was a very religious Mennonite woman, but she just, she gave me the freedom to express and be and become who I was to become, if you wish.
Well, let me tell you
this. At least she wasn't narrow-minded.
Let me tell you, you've mentioned two words, Mennonite and Friday the 13th. My daughter was born on Friday the 13th, August 13th, and my grandmother and her mother, or her sister, Aunt Mary, they were Mennonites. So folks need to understand that's a certain Christian group that belongs to the Anabaptist denomination. It's named for Minnow Simon of Friesland.
Right.
Friesland.
Broke away from Martin Luther.
Yeah, so when they came over to America, some of my people were Anabaptist, and so they still dress a little differently, because I know that my cousins I played with that were Mennonites still had the longer dresses, and some of them still wear the little caps. So tell us about, were you a child Mennonite? Did you have to wear longer dresses? And they couldn't play like drop the handkerchief at the family get-togethers we had. The Mennonite side of my family were really different. We were more modern in today's time. So just what were you like? Were you a Mennonite child?
I was a Mennonite child, but I was a Mennonite Brethren child, and the Mennonite Brethren are the most liberal of all the Mennonite branches. They believe in educating their girls, and they believe in music and culture. So, we were encouraged to live a simple life, to be pacifists. There were those, traditional no-nos, no drinking, dancing, or sex, or no makeup, but we pretty much could, wear what we wanted to, and so on and so forth. And again, music and education was encouraged. A lot of my ancestors were PhDs. My son is a PhD. Several of my uncles as well. So it was a fairly liberal upbringing, Mennonite upbringing. But what I took from it was Jesus. I saw him when I was a little kid in Sunday school already, and the music, the classical music, which was just fills my soul and my heart. It just creates an expansion within me that is really phenomenal. So I appreciate that part of it. But I always knew I wasn't going to be following up with a baptism into this church or religion.
Well, what part of the country of Anabaptism, because the Russian Revolution, it says that it was formed in 1860, the Mennonite Brethren Church, Russian Mennonites in 1860. But what do you think? Yeah, the Brethren, Mennonite Brethren. What do you remember about them? Were your family Mennonites, and you just were born into that faith?
Yes, yes. My ancestors were Russian Mennonites, German and Dutch originally, and had lived in Russia since the late 1700s. So my father and mother were both born in Russia and escaped at just after the First World War and came to Canada.
Wow.
And they came to Western Canada.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we left everything behind. It was very traumatic, and I was always trying to dig out stories from my father, and he refused to talk about Russia, and because they were traumatized, right? Many were martyred and sent to Siberia to camps and so forth. So there was a lot of trauma. But, we can release all this trauma, and I can tell you a little story about releasing this Mennonite trauma that, I'd inherited from my generations. And
Go ahead.
You want to hear that story?
Sure.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
So
go for it.
This was about 25 years ago, and some of the members of my mother's side, my matrilineal lineage, were calling forth a family gathering because somebody had shown up from Eastern Europe who is now living in Germany, and she had done a genealogy of our matrilineal family tree. And one of my cousins was bringing her to British Columbia, and there was this huge family gathering, and I was able to attend, and it was a lovely time of reconnecting with these people who I kind of put them out there, because I knew I wasn't going to follow that religion, so I didn't keep in touch with my mother's side of the family or my father's side of the family, but it felt really important to go to this reunion. And about midnight or so, or shortly before that, one of my cousins said, "Let's all gather around the grand piano and let's sing the songs of our faith." And that did it. I said to myself, I'm out of here. But the little voice inside said, stay. So I stayed, and everybody, there were 55, 60 people, everybody started singing these old songs that I'd heard as a child and were in my psyche from the past. And as we were singing and the piano was playing, I processed all that genetic trauma. And suddenly I felt this huge peace just kind of move out of my emotional field and into my mental field, spiritual field, and out. It was just like somebody had just swept a blanket through me, and whoosh, away went this peace. And man, did I feel a lot lighter after that. And this was already after I had, cleared my karma and anything that I knew had held me back in this life that I'd come here to clear. So that was pretty phenomenal. I encourage everybody to stick with these little situations that come up, because an experience like that, to release your, the root chakra genetic stuff that we've inherited. And one of my spiritual teachers was Oshina Fastwolf. She was a Native American teacher, and I studied with her in Washington, D.C. and in California. And she told us that we inherit 4 generations of past stuff. Others say more than that. I've heard 7, but yeah. So
yeah, there's a theory that it stays in our cells, and so you can have. We had a client. My husband and I do therapy, and we had a client once that went into a full primal about. It wasn't her, but somebody in her cellular memories wasn't a direct ancestor, but somehow she got the trauma of going into Hitler's, gas chambers, and so she was in full catharsis, as if it was her own trauma that happened.
Yes.
Yes. So that you can get it. You don't know where it's coming from, and I don't know the formula. I haven't studied that level, but it's just there, and it could be a past life. We didn't know, but there's all these memories that come. But yes, you can clear. Marianne Williamson did a clearing ceremony here in Maui. I live in Maui, Hawaii. And she came, this was a number of years ago, late 90s, early part of the 21st century. And she had people of each like different races face each other and, hold their hands facing each other, looking into each other's eyes. And we did this incredible forgiveness ceremony of all the separation we felt because of our race, and all the wars because of the racial factor and conquering and being conquered. And there was not a dry eye in the house. I mean, it was just the most amazing, chilling thing that was done. So, therapy happens on a lot of levels. Powerful work. Yes. So forgiveness is always, you can do it and it goes into the morphogenic field, and it creates a healing for the whole planet. If you forgive within your own heart, or, you didn't have to have a dialogue and go, you did this and you did that. You just, you did a clearing. That was wonderful. What about you, TJ? You ever experienced anything like that?
Like what?
Forgiveness. Just spontaneous forgiveness because of things like that. The separation you felt over some kind of issue or some kind of story. We all tell ourselves stories. We judge people and project and reject, and we can go through our whole lives with rejection. Yeah, but what Agnes did was forgiveness.
Well, with religions teaching us, do unto others, and forgiveness is number one, as above, so below, but we're not supposed to judge and all of that. Yeah, all that's ingrained basically from back in the day, at least in this reality, of, the great church, and then the schism, and then the 16th century where it's all the Anabaptists came from. But most of us raised after that, if we weren't raised over in the old country as Muslims, it stemmed from Catholic and the break off from the Catholic, the great church. But, here in today's time in America, we separated church and state, whether it was good or bad. Believers, we're not supposed to judge, really. So I believe that what happened with the metaphysicians, which I claim to be, we always said that Solomon and then Jesus were the greatest metaphysicians. We followed that. And, it's up to each individual, their own path. So I've learned just to love and be loved, but forgiveness is part of loving people. A lot of people in today's time say they will forgive, but they'll never forget. So if it's in your DNA or not, your memory codes, or if you're really DNA enhanced or hybrids or all the stuff we speak of today, it's just a modern day's time. But, the pagans were not necessarily in the Catholic Church. So I haven't done a lot of the history of the pagan rites, but I have tried to study the books of what history has written. But maybe Agnes could talk about her historical knowledge on some of the things that were Anabaptist or before the Catholic Church. We were talking Akkadian there for a little while, and Anu, and from the heavens came. I don't know if they believed in forgiveness until Jesus. Did they? In your reality, Agnes, forgiveness, was that a thing?
The Mennonites definitely believed in forgiveness, yes.
And what about before them, when you were talking Anunnaki and Anu, or was that Janet, or both of y'all really? Do you think in the Akkadian, back in the oldest fired clay tablets, the Sumerian, Ishtar, and I guess Zarathustra, you think they've had a forgiveness, or was it?
Well, I think they created the religions. If we trace back the history of the creation of religions, which originally they were an attempt to control the population because there were so many human beings and so few Anunnaki, so they had to control the population. So they introduced the concept of religion. So these principles that we get, like the Ten Commandments, those are all Anunnaki. So they do talk. The Bible's Anunnaki. So that is, we're getting it from the Bible. But did they practice it? They're just like humans. What humans practice it, which humans don't. So it's very complicated. But that is the origin of that concept. And, of course, Christ and the Messiah, that was their origin, their concept as well. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Okay, let's where do we want to go now? There's a lot of things that we can cover. with what you know. So you mentioned that you met Moses and Mary. Can you tell us?
Yes.
How did you meet them, and what was that like, and what was your story with them?
I met Moses in the Middle East, in Jerusalem. I was just cleaning up lunch dishes one day when I felt this powerful force trying to contact me, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was getting sick, but I thought, okay, I'm going to go lie down on my couch and circle myself with white light and see what happens. And the day before this event, I should say, I had been in Jericho and reading something about a passage from Numbers, and that passage kind of stuck with me, and I thought, I remember thinking something about it, that I've been involved with this event that was mentioned in Numbers. And anyway, back to the couch in Jerusalem, and suddenly there's this fiery being standing beside my couch and where I was lying, and he was wearing this big, white long robe with a belt swinging around the middle, and had this wild gray hair, and I knew immediately that it was Moses. And he kind of yelled at me, and I felt immediately that we'd known each other, we'd had a past life connection. And he told me at the time that I had been, what's the word I'm looking for? I had challenged him back in the day about who could be part of the Levi clan, which was the priestly clan. And I believe that I told him, look, anybody that has evolved to any kind of state of consciousness should be able to be a priest. And he didn't like that at all. So he created a earthquake, and he killed me along with a lot of other people. We were dissenters. And so he killed me. And it's interesting because this is recorded in the Bible, by the way, as well. And so we had this past life connection where he wasn't a very nice guy. And I discussed this with a good friend of mine here in the Kootenays, who is a Kabbalistic rabbi, and he said, Moses was, he was not cool a lot of the time, So anyway, so that was my Moses experience, and boy, was he powerful. But, the whole Middle East is a huge portal, right, to the stars. It's an opening to the stars, and so there were a lot of beings coming and going there, and so that was my Moses experience. And Mother Mary, she came to me when I was living in northern Israel, about a stone's throw away from an ancient temple to Aphrodite, who's also known as Ishtar and Inanna, who I'm a reincarnation of. And it was about 1:30 at night, and I awoke to this being of light standing beside me, and she was wearing a blue robe, and she had the white scarf over her head, and she was just shining in all her glory of golden white light, and she was standing there with her hands, what I call in the prayer position. And I intuitively have taught my Reiki students to hold their hands that way when they're doing absent healing. And she was standing there with her hands in that prayer position, and she was directing energy to my pelvis, to the pelvic area, where I'd had pain since childbirth. It was this pain that had been there at this point, for 20-some years, and she was simply directing energy at that pelvic area. And I was really shocked at this apparition, and I just oh my goodness, it was just like this explosion of light. It kind of got me by surprise, and I was very shocked and sat up in bed. And of course, then she disappeared, or I didn't see her anymore. But she came again 2 more times when I lived in Jerusalem. And one time I was facilitating a healing session for a student, and she wanted to clear her karma of her Jewish heritage, which there were a lot of pieces that didn't fit for her anymore. And we were doing this session, and I saw an apparition, a being come through the window and into my Reiki healing room, and it was in the form of a woman, and standing beside the table, and I sensed it was Mother Mary again, and there was this golden light coming from this being, and she channeled it through me. It came through my crown chakra and through my body, out to my hands, to my student, and she shook a little bit, and she said, "Oh my God, I felt that, and now there's something shifting in me." And moments later, this ball of golden light kind of, after it had gone through her, it bounced back into me and into my uterus, where I'd had a prolapse of uterus since, I don't know where, probably since childbirth. And at that moment, it felt like a zipper was being pulled up inside of me from my uterus area. And I knew in those moments that prolapsed uterus had been readjusted and replaced to where it should be. And truly, this is what happened, because when I got back to Canada, I had various, I had some scans and mammograms, and what are the other full body scans called? Can't remember right now, but it confirmed that everything was in good shape down there. So another time when Mother Mary appeared, I asked her why she was appearing to me, and because I thought, this isn't just for me. It was also for my student and for another client at another time. And she told me that she was here and focusing on healing women's issues, and that was one of her karmic or whatever have you, one of her occupations at this time, one of those, that she was helping with in this dimension. So she appeared recently at summer solstice just last year, and as we were walking, I had a group, we were walking our labyrinth. We have a huge labyrinth in our field here, and it's based on the one at the Chartres Cathedral, the one in the Chartres Cathedral in France, and we were walking around there, and I saw this bright, bright light coming from above. It kind of looked like it was coming from the sun, but it manifested into the shape of Mother Mary again, and she was walking amongst us there as we were going through the labyrinth. So she's here, willing to help, helping with women's issues.
Do you believe in the Bhagavad Gita and the before the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, and all the Middle Eastern with yoga? And since you do Reiki, do you follow any of the ancient scriptures of the Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita, G-I-T-A.
That's a mouthful, yes.
I have a friend called Gita.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm an explorer in my own way. I've read books over the years on various. I've read some of Sitchin's books, and I met him and spoke with him at great length at a conference at Salisbury in 1993. And so no, I don't kind of follow anybody. I try to get my own vision, and sometimes, if I see something and can't determine it, I will Google and try to find out more information about what I'm seeing if I can't zone in on what's going on, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's more, you mentioned dimensions. That's why they talk about the dimensions. It's ancient texts, that go all the way back, and a lot of people miss that in their world religions, but it's one of the big ones, Bhagavad Gita, and it's real important to people in our business. But, I was just wondering, because you mentioned dimensions, and they talk about the dimensions and do what's right, and there's order in the cosmos and all that. So I was just led to read that on my journey, but everybody's journey going up, ascension is about everybody comparing, their theology or their scholarly ways or religions, and what makes them tick and what works for different people and individuals. But I've been told, people called me Ishtar and Zeus' daughter and things, and I had that in my memory. So I was just wondering, because when we start talking dimensions, a lot of times we go back to the oldest known words on the planet. And, back in India, that was very, very important, and still is, by the way. So philosophical, theological research, it goes way before, Christ existed. So some people like to look at what we've put on the planet from the beginning of time. I think that's why the Anunnaki has gotten so popular, because of the Sanskrit and Akkadian, everything we've got. So I was just wondering, because when we start talking dimensions, I sort of wanted to talk about that tonight, because of the Ascension Age making us aware of the Tree of Life and the 13 above and the 9 below, and that's 22 right there, right? And then we've got the Kabbalah, and since you're in Jerusalem, I imagine you do tarot reading. Do you by chance, the cards? I do. I just wonder if you use them.
I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, everybody has different tools they use and different world religions, but many of us blend them together for whatever reason. So, well, when you talk dimensions, then how do you do readings by chance? I didn't even ask you if you did readings.
I don't. I'm an activator of humanity. I teach people how to get their own access to the dimensions, for instance. Yeah. I don't do. The only time I ever do kind of a little mini reading is when I have clients. I ask them if they know their soul purpose, and if they don't, I ask them if they want me to read their soul colors, which I've been doing since I lived in Dominican Republic. I was living on that Bermuda Triangle ley line there. Yeah. And it was very, very powerful. I was very, very psychic there, as I always am when I'm living on a portal, and everyone is when they're living on portals. But so that's the only time when I ask people if they want to, if they want their soul colors read. The colors of our soul have meaning, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the people that read them, but nowadays everything is readable. It just depends on who you ask, I guess, and what their skills and labors. But they say we all have the same skills. But I like some of the tools. You did talk about Reiki, and my daughter calls it Reiki. She insists, because she learned it from Buddhist. She learned that word from the Buddhist in Arizona when she went up to a monastery. They taught her it was Reiki, not Reiki. And some say Reiki. But, yeah, it just depends on who you learned. I learned from a lady from Japan, and she brought it over, Janet, when we were there, 89 to 94. But she was still alive, and her daughter. So it was pretty cool. We learned laying on of hands, basically, and the various ways you could, use Reiki. And then, of course, she used a lot of the techniques from the old school that I don't even know who she said she learned from, and once it got into America and through Japan into Hawaii, and then over here it got really popular during our New Age group, right, before Ascension Age, before 2012. It was really brilliant.
1980. Hawaii Takata, who was third in line from Usui, the founder of Reiki, or modern day Reiki. Reiki just means universal energy, right? Yeah. Which we're all comprised of, but we can learn to channel it powerfully to, transfer it to someone else to facilitate healing. And so Takata came, I believe it was around 74, 75 when she came to America, to the U.S., and she began teaching and also facilitating for Reiki Master classes, teaching teachers how to teach. And so yes, it's expanded from there. And I'm seventh in line from the founder.
I have a question about
it meant laying on of hands, alternative medicine. But did you?
It's a wonderful tool.
Well, Mikao Usui was the one that a lot of the people learned from 1865, right? But I don't know, I can't remember the lady's name. I know her face, and I've put her in some of my commercials in the past for Reiki. But I swear to God, I cannot remember the name. It went into, there was American Academy of Neurology, I know, and this is important because so many people do believe spiritually that they heal. And I think what we do traditionally, but, it got to be sort of paranormal, too. I believe it's still called an alternative medicine or a pseudoscience. But, in cancer, with my daughter having leukemia, she got into Reiki, and Greg Braden, too, about the same time. But Reiki Master. So do you say Reiki, or what do you say? Some say, I guess
say Reiki.
I've
never heard it. Rika. You said Rika. I've not ever heard that before.
I hadn't either.
Doesn't matter.
It's from Buddha.
I've had Japanese guests when I had my retreat center that stayed with me for a week, and I asked them about Reiki. They didn't correct me, so I don't know.
I don't know where Rika come from.
Whatever.
Hey, I have a question. Can I ask this question? I was looking over what you wrote, and you talked about the 13 grandmothers of time. Yes. Can you explain to me what that means? What are they?
Yes.
Absolutely. Tell us about that.
We have the 13 heaven dimensions.
I'd love to. The 13 spirit grandmothers of time are ancient adepts that birthed the earth at the Permian era when the continents first split apart. And I determined that to be about 300 million years ago, somewhere in that time frame. And the 13 spirit grandmothers came through to an acquaintance of mine in Quebec in 2003, and they gave her teachings. She was a First Nations woman, Ojibwe, and she wrote down a lot of information as they shared it with her about initiations humans must go through to evolve, to ascend. She also talked about the 13 spirit grandmothers and what shields they carried and how they needed to contact human women because it was time then for them to come through. And they said it was very difficult for them to come into this dimension because they're 12th dimensional beings, which, I consider 13th to be God creator, great spirit level, and then 14th source. That's the dimensional framework that I use. So they're just below creator level of their level of a consciousness. And so I see them not very clearly, but I see them kind of in a hazy light and get a general idea of how they look. And since I was asked to carry a shield with a ceremony in 2004 to bring their teachings and to bring them into the earth dimension, and we were to ground them into the earth, all the teachings. And since 2004, I've been connected with the spirit grandmothers. And they come from different stars and different planets in our solar system. And some of them do not look human. One looks kind of turtle-like, and one looks kind of like a combination of monkey, kind of ape, but not like that, but has 3 digits on her hands and on her feet. She's Arcturian, for instance. The Palladian grandmother looks very white. In the moon that we're in now, this is the 13th or the last moon of the year that the grandmothers say. And in this moon, it's the Moose Clan grandmother shield that is prevalent. And it's a peace shield. And she sits at the center of the circle where the staff is, or the center pole of this circle of the spirit grandmothers. There's also 13 spirit grandfathers of time, and they will be able to bring in their teachings when enough women take their places on planet Earth that they're meant to have. So very, very interesting to carry that shield. I was given the Lizard Clan shield, and the Lizard Clan shield represents preconsciousness, which is interesting because I got that shield at the time when I was seriously researching the goddess and having experiences of that dimension. And also genetic memories and crystals and the consciousness of crystals. And so since that time, I've been working more with crystals and healing, and just for my own connection to my star and to other star beings and so forth. And I really feel honored to be part of this shield carrier and of this spirit grandmother clan, and love to teach about them and what they taught us through various sessions. Through Patricia Collerford is the individual who they first contacted, and they asked us to do ceremony each time at the new moon, and that the new moon was always in the beginning of their time, was only to be practiced by women. And I know we've had a lot of patriarchal societies since then, and I think our most recent one probably 5,000 years ago, but where the patriarchy has been taking over our matrilineal sacred sites and also a lot of our ceremonies. But the spirit grandmothers stressed greatly that we gather as women on the new moon and, you know, get down belly to belly with Mother Earth, and to bring forth the new light that comes through every new moon. We're the birthers of the new energies that come through. So this was stressed very often in our ceremony that we did in 2004. Any questions?
Yeah. Let's see. Where do we want to go? We have about a half an hour left.
You know, in every religion they have 13 and 9, and we use it in the Kabbalah, and we use it in tarot cards. In the Aztecs, Janet, you know, all the Indians believed in the 13 heavens, the 9 underworlds, and the tree of life, and all those above. It was inverted. So the 13 is a very sacred number, and then, you know, we have the various levels. So whether it was 13 heavens, 13 grandmothers of the cosmos, and the original, you know, as moon goddess was number 1, the 13. But, you know, it depends. So it's important to know these things because they do say that, you know, we came from the stars and the 13 heavens, and how all the world religions are so similar. Back in the day before we even had the Bible. So, you know, people go back to the stars, and then we have the Council of the 13 in the various Indians, not just Aztec mythology. But are you familiar with all of that, Janet, with the different gods? It's just different, but it's basically 13 heavens, 13 9 unders, 22, and how everything's constructed in 13 levels, and we have 13 dimensions. But isn't it funny how we use numbers? Yeah, they said we
originally had 13, what do you call it?
Levels or dimensions in the beginning. God.
The astrology, what are they? 13 signs, but somehow one got lost, and that's part of the control of the sacred ancient teachings. But
Milky Way too.
Enki used to take his son Marduk to the moon, and they were trying to figure out the astrology. So they're trying to figure out the return of the Nibiru. So they created astrology and the different signs of the heavens to kind of measure time and when it was time to trade, who was going to be the king or the ruler of the earth. And so Marduk kept waiting for his turn. It's like, when's my turn? When's my turn? So his turn was, you know, always overlooked, and they kept pushing it back. And, oh, no, not yet, not yet. So that's what they ended up having the war between Ishtar Inanna and Marduk Ra. So Ishtar Inanna is one of the most important people in history. And she went a little bit bonkers, but so did Marduk Wrong. There was some kind of influence of this planet and all of its, influence that created a temporary insanity. So they had this big war, which ended in Sodom and Gomorrah, and almost wiped everybody off the face of the earth, Anunnaki and human alike. But it really, depopulated humanity.
It was a nuclear war.
It was nuclear, yes. Mm-hmm.
It was a nuclear war. I experienced a vision of that while I was meditating at the Dead Sea. That annihilated.
You got in touch with that.
All life there. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So
they nuked
ancient modern tools.
Yeah, and the guys,
and they
nuked
Inanna's territory. There were a lot of things over there in India. So Inanna was granted the Indus Valley. So there's nuclear ruins there too. And then of course that's why you have all those stories in the of I forget the names of the gods over in India, but the war continued over there because for some reason, I know what it was. Dumuzi was killed, and Marduk was responsible for Dumuzi's death. And so Inanna never forgave Marduk, and she kept trying to find Dumuzi. So every time she had a lover and it wasn't Dumuzi, they ended up waking up dead, so to speak. She'd have a lover. So you're talking about the sexuality. Anyway, the big story, I won't go into that right now, but she's a primary character, and she may be what's behind the Statue of Liberty, but it could be her brother, Utu. She had a twin brother, Utu Shamash. These are very important. But I was looking through the images of Ishtar, and it does have the crown of the Statue of Liberty. She has some depictions of that radiant crown, that the
red
Statue of Liberty wears.
Are you familiar with
cap?
The red cap?
I had an amazing backpack that I could fly with.
Say that again?
I said I had an amazing backpack that I could fly with. When I went to visit Erishkigal, who had was living in South Africa, she had the domain of down under, the underworld, which was Africa. And that's how I traveled in those times. It was like
you're talking about the historical. Yeah, there's a woman who somehow relates to the Queen. She says she's a modern incarnation of Erishkigal. I've had her on the show. Elizabeth Windsor Craig. Yeah, Elizabeth Windsor Craig. She said that she's the illegitimate sister of the Queen or the cousin of the Queen. Philip. Maybe she's Philip's daughter. I forget her story now. But anyway, she's over in northwest United States up there. So she said she's the modern incarnation of Erishkigal. So we find a lot of people that are having memories of the gods and goddesses. And so I've been looking at that phenomenon for a long time. It's really reincarnation. But people have memories. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It definitely is time.
Well, some people say that was Isis or Venus or Aphrodite or Ishtar. But France was the one that's supposedly given us the statue, right? Is that correct?
ISIS, and ISIS is not the same body as Aphrodite or Ishtar. She is an emanation of Mother Mary, Isis.
Right. Well, there's an interpretation that Isis is Mary is Nimla. And that the wedding in Canaan was finally she and Enki. They were forbidden to marry. They had fallen in love. They were forbidden to marry by Father Anu. And she was, I have this guy, Glenn Bogue. He's doing research on that. She was blackened, which meant that she was forbidden to wed ever because she had had a child out of wedlock with Yahweh Enlil, and she was betrothed to Enki, but then they broke her betrothal with Enki because in order to for Anu to stay close to the kingship of Nibiru, he had to marry his eldest son, Enki, off to Dinti, what was her name? Damkina, who was from the other, she was the daughter of the other king, right? So that was their alliance. That was a political wedding. So then Nema was heartbroken, so she ended up having a child with Endo. And so anyway, if you look at the different symbols that they have, like if you go through the Egyptian period, you look there, they have these things on their head, they have things on their feet, they have wings. That's what you do. You should compare all this stuff, and you kind of get a picture of who are these people.
Well,
but
she was wrapped in a Greek toga. She was wrapped in a Greek toga, but a lot of people in paganism say that she's the goddess of liberty, and others say she's a Roman goddess. It just depends on, well, just look it up, folks. It's all out there. We got Gnostic warriors and pagan goddesses and Libertas, the Roman goddess imported to America. So there's all kind of ways to think. But the point is, we have a beautiful symbol there. We're supposed to recognize freedom, right? Statue of Liberty.
And it's a woman. And it's a woman. I mean, what could be better?
So whatever belief system, the point is we all have
any statues like that in Canada. We need
some.
Oh, you don't have any statues like that?
Yeah. Well, we've gone all over the place. Let's see what I said tonight. I said, who are we? And what are we going to talk about? Who are we and why are we here? Let's get into we got into a lot of the background, but why are we here, folks? Talking, why are we here? What are we doing here? And some people think that it's just a coincidence, and others believe we're acting and reacting. Life is a stage, and we're merely the players on it. And let's see what Agnes and Janet think for sharing Ascension Age. I believe we came into 12/21/12, a lot of us that were metaphysicians, believing that the world was going to be different after 12/21/12, and we'd all begin thinking more consciously and awake and aware that the Ascension Age was upon us. So something unexpected happens when we compare our lives to each other. But Agnes is known for saying, who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? And what are the possibilities? These are many insights that glean the new series of metaphysical classes for positive thinkers with IsisMoonPublishing.com, and she's in Canada. And Agnes, Janet asked you earlier, how do you say Toews or Toews or Agnes Toews-Andrews? Is that your maiden name, and how do you say it properly? And we'll go on into who are we and where we come from and where are we going, because everybody has their own ideas. But is your name Toews or Toes? Could you say it for us?
It's actually pronounced Taves.
Wow.
Wow. Agnes Toews-Andrews. And Agnes Taves is my maiden name.
Okay. So Andrews is your husband.
Yes. Yeah. And that's my national best-selling author name. So that's the name I use most often. And the Taves, it was pronounced Toews in German, and when our ancestors came to Canada, of course, they didn't have those two little dots called the umlaut, which you put on top of an O, which give you the oi, so Toews.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so it got the T-O-E, it got the E in there, so a lot of people pronounce it Toes, so Taves or Toes, whatever.
I got it. Okay. And you've got
That's
books
cute.
out there. You may want to mention your books, the type that you've written. And we'll go on to the next level of getting down deep into where did we come from, where we're going, and why are we here. So what a couple of your books, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. Thank you. One of the two of the latest books that I've written are called Awake, a Spiritual Primer, and it encompasses 10 years of my paranormal experiences in Canada and around the world. And I write about my twin flame experience in that book. I write about a lot of the UFO experiences that I've had, ET connections in that book. I also talk about 13 dimensions in that book and nature spirits. I've been in contact with nature spirits for many years. I do co-creative work called conings with nature level. I do ghost busting. I've written about that in that book, and about some of my past lives and incarnations and how I healed them through the CCMBA, which is known as the Complete Conscious Mind-Body Alignment Technique. And if anyone out there listening wants to release their karma and release all that stuff that from childhood or birth process, the CCMBA is a very powerful process for doing that. Excuse me. I also have observed many crop circles during my life. The first one in 1993. I talk about that in the book Awake. And I talk about the photon band in the Age of Light and Ascension in that book. And most recently, I republished a book that came out in 2010, and that book is called The Goddess Lives, Poetry, Prose, and Prayers in Her Honor. And I'll just grab a book here. I write about the ancient 13 spirit grandmothers of time in this book, and about the 13 spirit grandfathers of time and their shields and what they mean. I've been in touch with the Kachina shield, and that's the 10th shield of the spirit grandfathers. I talk about British Columbia's center of the universe in this book, where I always hear singing or hear the Om come beaming over the land. It's a very special place. I write about my experiences at the December 22nd, 2012 Galactic Alignment. The alignment was actually at 2:40 Eastern Standard Time on that day, and I was in meditation aware. I write about my experiences of that. And I write about ancient goddess cultures in ancient Lemuria, which I've had a past collection of. I write about spiritual path practices that humans can follow and inspiration to do so, and about goddess appearances like Sophia, Isis, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Gaia, and Breed, which are some of them that have appeared to me. And talk about discoveries that I've made at sacred matrilineal sites around the world. So that is The Goddess Lives, and that came out in 2017. So those two books are my major paranormal metaphysical discovery exploration books.
Are they available on Amazon?
Awake is available on Amazon, but The Goddess Lives is available only through my website, which is...
I have your website on isismoonpublishing.com?
That's right.
Is that your website?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it is.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so if you want to get those books, I won't bother getting it off Amazon. They can get both those books through your website, right?
That would be lovely.
Okay, excellent.
IsisMoonPublishing.com. So that's
Publishing.com.
Right. So, folks, please write that down in case you like what we're talking about tonight, and maybe you need some clearing, or it's a beautiful website in Isis Moon Publishing. Agnes, Toews-Andrews, looks like
Caves, like caves.
Agnes, like a taser. Agnes Toews-Andrews, Metaphysical Master, national best-selling author, and you want to talk a little bit about why you feel like so many people are awakening in the Ascension Age, and so many of us for 30 or 40 years felt like we were called, and a lot of people may be out there that are very far advanced. More so, kids are coming in with much more knowledge of the dimensions and knowing they're eternal or they're multidimensionals or immortal beings now. But back in the day, we were all magical and reading that we were going to be working during this time as time travelers. So many of us women now in our 60s and 70s that haven't passed are still here creating and working in the 13 dimensions and working with people that are being initiated into understanding higher levels of consciousness and what to do with it now. So we're considered baby boomers, and we're goddess lovers, and living in the feminine array, if you will, and many of us are psychics, and talk about the age of ascension, meaning how even Jesus Christ ascended, if you believe in that, or how we can actually transcend in various dimensions. Some of us may just fade away, and some of us may just ascend. You may just hear people that have totally left the earth. But let's let Agnes, would you like to speak to that for a few minutes? I'll mute, and the goddess lives, but creation, 13 dimensions, we've talked a little about that. But what do you think in today's time about the ascension age? And Janet, chime in if you want to about our future, where we're going with this. So you think we're going to dissolve?
Yeah, it sounds so exciting. It's really excites me to hear you talk about it, Theresa. And I started teaching ascension workshops in, I think it was 2002, and I presented a workshop and a lecture at the Edgar Cayce conference that happens in Kingston, Ontario, at the university there every year. And what has come to me is that we definitely have come here to clear our karma. We've got to do that to begin to work on the ascension body. So clearing our karma is healing our past stuff that we haven't healed. You know, do the forgiveness with your father who abused you, or your mother who constantly hated you, et cetera, et cetera. And so first of all, we need to clear our karma. And I was talking about a process, the CCMBA, Complete Conscious Mind-Body Alignment Technique, which is a wonderful process to facilitate for that. And it takes about an hour and a half to do this session, and I do it in private sessions and in group sessions. And it's very, very easy to learn. We simply say a special prayer before we begin this, and we call in the archangels or angels or ascended masters are called in to help facilitate. And what they do is they put you into a position where you can release your stuff. And the past life stuff is recorded in the spine, and other stuff in our emotional body. And so, yes, ascension, let's clear that karma, and because, that's why a lot of us have come back in this lifetime, and myself included. So having done that, we can work through various processes to raise our light body so that we can do that transmutation at some point in time. And in one of my classes, I talk about the unified chakra technique. And do you ladies know that technique, the unified chakra technique? Are you familiar with it?
I don't know what you're referring to, but I do some chakra stuff. But tell us about your technique.
Yeah, everybody has a different. With the chakras nowadays, they call what we used to call chakra balancing. They do chakra healing they call it people come to me, kids, saying, do you know how to do the ascension chakra balancing? I'm like, I imagine it's the same thing we had 40 years before you got here on the planet, but raising your vibration through the Kundalini experience up your nervous system. But, as far as the energy and the colors, we still use Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But, we also used to take them all the way up through the 13 dimensions. So do you do them all at once? Is that what you mean with all the colors, all the sounds and vibrations? How do you describe it, Agnes?
The unified chakra technique that I use, we begin with bringing this huge ball of light into the center of our heart, and then we expand that upward to our throat chakra and down to the solar plexus, and we keep bringing this ball of light in until we travel through all the bodily chakras up and down, and then we go into what is known as the waves of Metatron, and they come from the alpha chakra, which is about 6 to 8 inches above our crown chakra, and it's a little bit forward of the crown chakra, and the omega chakra, which is below the root chakra and a little bit forward, about 6 to 8 inches forward. So from visualizing all this light expanding through all the bodily chakras, we go into those alpha and omega, visualize the this ball of light flowing kind of like the raku or a zigzag fashion through our body's energy field to the Omega chakra. And then we move on to the next one, the 8th one, the emotional body, and then the mental body, the spiritual body, and then the spiritual body, which is part of our higher self. And then we go on to the Christ consciousness field, which is the 12th dimension or level, and then 13th being creator, God, great spirit, intelligent mind. We have so many names for God. And then reaching source. So we're building this light body through all of the levels of our body. But we start with bringing that big ball of light in through the center of our heart and then expanding it up and down. And it's amazing what you can do when you do this regularly. And after you've done it for some time, you can just say unify chakra, and you can feel your whole light body just going into that space.
Yeah, we've done those on the radio. So it is the same, using the heart chakra. A lot of drum below Melchizedek teaches a lot of heart healing and the golden light and coming into the heart chakra. But we also use the toroidal energy like you do and the dimensions and the torus. So, they use geometry for the surface. So some people use golden light a lot, and I like that. So that's a good thing. And Metatron's always been a great teacher, one of my teachers. And whenever he was around, I could smell sandalwood. And I'm not the only one that says that. I've had other people tell me they could tell because we couldn't see him, but we could smell him. And we weren't we weren't burning sandalwood. So through the years, folks, 40, 50 years, I started practicing Ascension and the Aquarius bookstore, everything I get my hands on back in 1984. And I met Stephen Halpert. So I knew music and then Rice University.
Weren't those fun years exploring
all
healing arts and metaphysical books that were coming out?
But we didn't have the internet. It wasn't we had to go find different bookstores, folks. It was a whole different world. It was like you're on a mission from God, and you're out finding books.
When we started, there were hardly any books on this. All we had was like Ruth Montgomery and Edgar Casey and
Shirley MacLaine.
And Shirley MacLaine, yeah. So you guys have it made. You have the internet and all these YouTubes and movies.
They can walk into bookstores, go into like the Books A Million and find all the New Age metaphysical Harry Potter stuff, all in the same area with the cards, tarot cards, and just all kind of magical things that we weren't even allowed to think about, much less buy commercially. I'm just absolutely amazed at how much the world has changed, especially with the metaphysicians. So, and I did like the fact, Janet, you told me she was a metaphysician, and she uses that word, a metaphysician master.
That Agnes is.
Yeah,
I have this
title.
What's that?
We should use that for our intuitive work. I like Metaphysician Master. She's got on her site. Yeah, she has workshops and sessions. So, folks, check out Isis Moon Publishing. Is that you up there in the black robe there, Agnes? Your picture. I know it is below her.
Sorry?
With the drums.
I said,
is that you in the black robe up there, your picture on Isis Moon Publishing? And I can see you with your drums, and below that.
Yeah, I have a picture.
I usually wear black robes at the New Moon gatherings, but I'm not wearing that today.
Not today.
Not today. No.
Yeah.
No. I didn't have to dress up because we're talking on over phones.
Yeah.
Right.
I like these drums.
I wanted to mention that we have 7 minutes to go, but I just wanted to mention that we were talking about the what we call the chakra healing. My husband and I, we practice Tantra, and we go through the chakra system, and we address the psycho-emotional issues at every level, like your root chakra, your sexual chakra, your all the different power centers, and we do psychotherapy on each level, and we help people go into their issues on each level. Are they feeling insecure? Do they have issues of the heart? They're not empowered. Whatever it is, trouble speaking up, and we go back to when did that begin and how. So we use a different system, but there's all kinds of ways of healing, visualization, psychotherapy, but eventually the end result is when you clear your energies on all chakra levels, you might have what's called a Kundalini awakening, and that's where your Kundalini gets activated and it goes out through your chakras, out your crown, and you reconnect to Source, and you remember who you are. Because ultimately, it's the same thing. You go up there, all the levels, the 13 levels, and you go through your Christic consciousness, Buddha self, and all the way to your Source self, and you remember who you are and your mission, why you came down here to agree to, incarnate in physical forms and, all these different multidimensional forms and learn what you need to learn and evolve, grow, and become conscious. So it's wonderful that we have these tools at our hand. Okay, go ahead, back to you.
Yeah, they call it a unified, but, it just depends on what class are. It's very big in the New Age. It's the Golden Age, I guess, but the unified chakra balancing, there's all kind of websites. Various people claim they started it and put a new spin on it, Janet, but it's basically learning how to move. It's energy, moving energy. It's like Reiki, absolutely. But it's important to teach people that they are energy and how to use it. And it's a great healing tool, folks. So if you're not familiar with it, whether you use unified or golden light or the toroidal or energy or numbers or the chakra balancing, but we've always used the colors of the rainbow and some plus, gold, silver, white, gray, blah, blah, blah. But it just depends. And the main thing is if you're not familiar with it, find you a good teacher because it's sort of, I guess to me it's sort of important because it opened up my world into colors and light, chakra balancing, prisms, crystals, the torus and geometry and then sacred geometry. So you'd be surprised. One thing leads to another. And I'd like to have you back sometime, hopefully in the year, and catch us up on, your classes and workshops and all of that. Agnes, since you are definitely a practitioner, it's one to find study, people that study and research, but it's another to have practitioners that can come and talk to us about what they're physically doing now, in the now, right, Agnes? You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And, I speak from experience, and I think that's important to find a practitioner who's experienced a lot of what she's teaching.
Yes. Well, because it's worked, and it made you a better person.
Absolutely. I've gone out to Source, actually, through a cranial sacral session, but this was very recently, and so these kinds of experiences are ones that I have been through. So when I teach about the chakra system or teach about ascension or teach about the 13 dimensions, I can explain how it felt to me and what I saw. So that helps a lot in the classes. Speaking from personal experience, I find. But I love to do it. It's just my passion to turn people on to, the unseen dimensions and the metaphysical, which is, beyond the body. And the body too, we have to remember to honor our bodies and, dig into those superfoods and so forth. And, there's a brain tonic recipe, for instance, I give out in one of the classes. And it's amazing when I first started taking it about, 20 years ago now, I started remembering things from when I was very young, like the age of 1, 2. And it what it does is reconnects the nerve endings, the synapses to the brain, this particular formula, and so that we can continue to live healthy, youthfully in these bodies until we ascend. And I think that's something that I stress a lot in my classes as well.
Well, Janet, we'll have to have her back sometime, and we'd like to make a list of practitioners in our ACO association, Janet. So we have the Ascension Center, Janet and I, and everybody is the center of their ascension. So Ascension Center we are. So Agnes, thank you for coming, and we'll have to have you back sometime on Ascension Age and Ascension Center and how we use our spiritual pathways as women talking together and how we can all get along a little bit better knowing what field represents to all of us. And I guess any last words? We've got 30 seconds.
I just encourage everyone to be their soul purpose. And if you don't know your soul purpose, call me. I can help you with that. But it's so important in this day and age to be who we are and just forget about what everybody or anybody else says, but be your soul purpose, because when we are, we create this bright spark wherever we are that helps to expand the consciousness on this planet. And we're all connected to. Oops, sorry, I knocked my phone off.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I was like, whoops.
I haven't descended. Oops. My phone did. But where's that going? Anyway, just
everybody descend. Work on it. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody, we're all descending. So that's where we're going.
Yeah,
we're ascending.
We want to be we're part of that group consciousness. And when we raise that group consciousness, we have the opportunity as a planet and as a human life stream to ascend. So we're all in this together. I'm not going before you go. So let's all put some effort into that. We're going together with the planet.
So that sounds good. I have to run. I'm sorry. Somebody's at my door. Love and blessings and aloha. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank
aloha.
you. So we appreciate it. All right. So, folks, we're all ascension beings.
It's my pleasure.
And we all came from somewhere, and we're going somewhere, so we're all going. Isn't that exciting? So the possibilities are just whatever you make them. So be sure to achieve and believe, and we can achieve what we believe. And Agnes is a believer and an achiever, and she's helping those as a practitioner. So look her up, Agnes Andrews, at IsisMoonPublishing.com. And thank you so much, Agnes. Hope to have you back soon, and we'll put you out there on our Ascension Age websites. Okay, it'll be AscensionAge.com, and I've got AscensionPsychic.com, and then we've got ACO, Association for Ascension Center Organization, and Alien Contact Org. And so we'll put you several places with your link and make sure people can contact you. So be sure and buy your books too, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the universe and the goddess, thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you. And I like to say namaste. So thank you so much. All right. Good night. Thank you so much. Hope to have you back.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.